So my reading for the month of July taught me that there is a possibility that I could become a shonen bro again. Hello all of my otaku friends, my name is Profitaku and welcome back to my channel for my July manga reading log. I read a grand total of 43 volumes this month, a wide variety of series to talk about, so let's get started. As always with all of my reading logs, no spoilers. I will never tell you what specifically happens in a volume. If it's a new series, I just want to tell you some general characteristics about it. If it's an ongoing series, do I like the direction that it's going in? If it's an end to a series, does the ending land? Out of the 43 volumes I read this month, 5 of them were from Saturday AM. I did an entire video going over all of their manga from their catalog, so I highly recommend you check out that video if you'd like to hear my thoughts on those specific volumes. First up, I want to start with a digital read that's not published in English, but I read volumes 21 to 24 of one of my favorite shonen series of all time, Kono Oto Tamara. For those of you who've never heard of this series, it's exactly like Haikyuu, but with music, specifically following a high school kodo club. I love these 4 volumes. It dived into the side characters and some of the characters that haven't gotten their own mini arcs yet, and it was expertly written. The pacing was great. The jumping around to different characters seemed very fluid and natural. Yes, sometimes it did get a little sappy and stereotypical, but I can deal with it because it's just such a great series. Volume 24 ends with the beginning of a new arc. There is some drama brewing with some new characters coming in, and I cannot wait to see how that impacts our friends in the Kodo Club. Alright, this next section here, we're going to go over all the things I read from Viz Media this month, and first up we have Insomniacs After School Volume 2. I absolutely love this series. I love the introduction of the new character. I think they fit very well with our OG cast from Volume 1. What I really love about the storytelling here is that they use a lot of blank panels. So what I mean by that is that they have a lot of artwork but no text, and the way that they're able to depict a story through the illustrations is masterfully done. This manga is also very educational when it comes to the shtick of the club and how that club actually functions. It's really cool to read, and I'm glad I can actually learn something. I totally can see why this has high ratings, and I cannot recommend this enough. Another mangaka that likes to use illustrations to tell a story instead of text, we have Goodbye Eri, which is a one-shot by Tatsuki Fujimoto. This is a very well written one-shot about a boy who's trying to make a movie, and it's just expertly written. The storytelling is fantastic, the characters are intriguing, it kept me on my toes the entire time, and the twists and turns were expertly done, and I didn't feel like it was inorganic at all. Considering all the problems that I have with Chainsaw Man, I have thoroughly enjoyed all of the other Fujimoto series, so I cannot wait to start Fire Punch sometime down the road and try out the rest of the catalog. Next up here, I read Alice in Borderland volumes 9, 10, and 11, and why I stopped halfway through Omnibus 6 was because it was the end of an arc and a start of a new arc. I decided to just go ahead and wait for the next omnibus, and then I will go ahead and continue the series. If you want to put a mark on the grittiest death game series you can, Alice in Borderland is it. It is just one step ahead of Battle Royale in my personal opinion, from the depthness of characters, the intricacy of the story, the interesting games that happen in the series. It is just so cool. Even though the second half of the series is drastically different than the first half, I still think it was presented very well. The transition was smooth and organic, and I just love the intensity of what this story is bringing. Next up here is Honey and Clover Volume 1. This is from the same mangaka who does March Comes in Like a Lion. This story follows a group of boys in college and art school in Tokyo. They're a stereotypical group of guys, and then this girl right here joins the art school. This volume reminded me exactly of the premise of Rainbow Days, and to be honest with you, I did not like this that much. I felt like I was reading Rainbow Days, but in terms of just storytelling, it wasn't good. I couldn't get invested into the characters, and there was a huge underutilization of the girl main character, and because she's such an important part of the story, because her personality doesn't get shelled out that much in this first volume and her appearances are sparse at best, I just couldn't get invested in the story at all. So yeah, I really don't think I'm going to be picking up any more of this. I guess if I'm in the mood for a shoujo series down the road, I'll keep going with this one digitally. Speaking of Rainbow Days, we have Rainbow Days Volume 4, and this was a fantastic volume. I really loved the side chapters in here. I did like the episodic nature, and I do like that there was progression to our story with our 4 boy main characters. So yes, this is one I highly recommend. This last part of the Viz Media section of this reading log is what I'm going to dub Shonen Bro Corner, a bunch of shonen I read this month. First up, I read Kaiju number 8. I read volumes 5, volume 6, and volume 7. Just when I think I'm about to drop this series just sucks me back in with great storytelling, great characters, and amazing action. What I really appreciate about Kaiju number 8 is the linear storytelling. It doesn't go off into in many different directions, so it's hard to follow. There's just a very concise storyline with interesting characters who have different personalities, but they all kind of come together into the main story. There's a very monumental moment in this arc that really blew me away, from the action scenes to the ramifications of what happened in that arc. I cannot wait to see where this series goes. Next up here, I read the last 3 volumes of Dr. Stone. I read volumes 24, 25, and 26. Look, here's what I gotta say about Dr. Stone, okay? The ending was lackluster at best. I had this series at a solid high 8, but then it went down to a middle of the road 7 because of that ending. I'm not saying the ending was necessarily bad, it's just not what I wanted. For those of you who don't know, volume 22 of Dr. Stone is probably one of the best volumes of shonen manga I've ever read in my entire life, and if they found some way to wrap it up around there, I think this series would be one of the best of all time. But because we got the last 4 volumes that was very rushed and it seemed very crazy and hectic, and then we got that ending, I just feel like it took a little bit of gas off the pedal. Next up is another Shonen Jump series that I was going to act, but then this volume just sucked me right back in. We have Mission Yozakura Family Volume 5. What I loved about this volume is they're starting to put some puzzle pieces together and starting to create an actual storyline that I'm getting invested in. And though this volume has a mix of linear storytelling and episodic chapters that don't necessarily mean anything to the main story, I absolutely love these episodic chapters. I think they're super cute, super funny, they're engaging, they're different, and because there's a large cast of characters, they're always a lot of fun with a lot of different personalities. So I guess I'm just gonna keep going with this. Look, I'm happy that I have this in my collection, and I'm glad this is redeeming itself. And last but not least, I read the 2-volume series by Tatsuya Endo, the creator of Spy Family. I read his first serialized manga in Shonen Jump, Tista, volumes 1 and 2. I did a whole Instagram post detailing my non-spoiler thoughts on the series. I'll leave a link down in the description below so that you can go check that out if you're so interested in reading it. But what I will say in layman's terms was it was a basic story with mildly good execution with some plot holes that just didn't get tied up correctly. But with that being said, when I think of Endo Sensei, I think of Anya, so it was cool to see some different characters and some different art and a generally different story. This next section here are going to be all the things I read from Yen Press. Of course, as always, thanks so much to Callista and the team for continuing to support this channel by sending me new releases from their catalog for me to review on the channel. First up here, we have one of the biggest disappointments of the entire year. We have Coffee Moon Volume 3. I did a whole YouTube short about 5 manga volumes that infuriated me, and this was number 1, and for a very good reason. For those of you who don't know, this is like a very dark version of Groundhog's Day, and in chapter 11 is the wrap up to this whole storyline, and it's very well done. And then we keep going in the volume, and it just feels like a different story. It felt like I was in like a weird fever dream. Characters were getting thrown left and right without any introduction. Powers were happening, and I was like, how does this relate to the story at all? So yeah, it just broke my heart. I love this series, but man, it left the worst taste in my mouth, and I do not think I'm going to continue with this one. Next up here is Kowloon Generic Romance Volume 4. This series continues to be great, but it is getting a bit confusing going volume by volume and waiting 2 months between each volume. So I think at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and wait for this series to conclude, and then I'll go ahead and binge the rest of it. But I love that we're diving into the sci-fi elements. The characters are the name of the game in this series, and they're so well written, and they're so deep, and they're so interesting. This is a manga you have to pick up. Next up here is a new volume 1, The Summer Hikaru Died, and it follows a boy and his friend as they're going through life, but the whole shtick of the manga is that one of the friends died 6 months ago, but he just came down the mountain, and he's this weird alien thing. It's super creepy, but I absolutely love it. The art is crazy and dark and gritty, and it kept me on my toes. The actual slice of life story itself moves pretty well in this volume, but in terms of the lore, it's definitely slow paced. It like presents that story and then just kind of leaves it alone. But with that being said, it's very easy to understand, and they presented it well. Next up here is volume 2 of Apparently Disillusioned Adventurers Will Save the World. This series follows a group of adventurers who are all backstabbed by their previous party, so they all come together to form their own disillusioned adventurers party. Look, I don't know why I like this series, I just like it. The story is simple and very easy to understand. It's a total turn your brain off series, and I think you need those type of manga volumes in your collection to kind of just like not think for a little bit. Last up here from Yen Press, we have Kiniro Mosaic. I read volumes 1 and 2 from this series, and this is a very interesting series. It's a slice of life for coma following a group of girls here. to or from England, and they go to Japan as foreign exchange students, and so they're following the school life. Does this beat K-On? No. Does this beat Nanan Biori? No. Is it good? Yes, it is. They play the shtick of two English girls going to Japan for high school very well, and it's very funny, and I love the cast of characters. I think sometimes the 4-coma dialogue itself can drag on in this specific series. I felt like sometimes I was getting bored because it was very wordy, but with that being said, I did like all the different episodes. Just one volume from Denpai this month, their most highly anticipated series of the year. We have March Comes In Like a Lion. This story follows Rei Kiriyama. He is a 17-year-old shogi player who lives in Tokyo, but his family died at a very early age, so he's been living a life of solitude. But the story follows Rei as he goes through his professional career and his interactions with this family of sisters. You can tell just from the first chapter that these characters are going to have very deep personalities and going to be very integral to the story as a whole. Some people had complaints about the pacing of this first volume, but I very much enjoyed the slower nature of the first volume, and that I can just sit back, relax, get to ingest the world at my own pace, and just understand these character personalities and relationships. I'm very much looking forward to volume 2. I implore Denpai, please get this on a quick release schedule. I know it's not going to happen considering how bad volume 1 was released, but I can always hope, and I'm going to continue reading this as the series comes out each volume. The reason why is because I want to continue to support this publication so it doesn't get canceled. Next up here from Kodansha, we have Madaka Kurua is Impervious to My Charms. This series follows the cool, popular, cute girl right here. Everybody loves her except for this monk guy. He grew up in a monastery and he's just not for what she's presenting to everybody. And of course she gets upset at this and she's trying to flirt with him to try to get him to crack, and he's just stone-faced. But the whole shtick of the manga is that he actually does like her a lot and he's just trying to suppress his emotions. I thought this series was just okay. It's basically a Nagatoro ripoff, and I'm not personally in the mood for a Nagatoro ripoff. I don't like the main character female. She doesn't have any redeeming qualities whatsoever. So yeah, I'm not going to continue with this series, but I definitely see that there is an audience for this one. Next up is one of the weirdest things that I read this month, and it's the manga adaptation of Saving 80,000 Gold in Another World for My Retirement. This series follows this teenage girl. She was recently orphaned, but she has a desire to live a very wealthy and respectable life. One day she gets pushed off of a cliff, she dies, and she gets isekai'd into this fantasy world. She finds out she has the ability to travel between this fantasy world and the modern world that she knows, and so her whole goal in life is to build up wealth in this fantasy world by taking her knowledge of the modern world and injecting it into this fantasy world. Look, I don't know about this one. It was just really weird. The first 3 chapters were way too slow and it took way too long to set up the actual story. I am intrigued by the actual premise of going between the worlds, but I just thought the execution wasn't there. I'm very much on the fence of picking up volume 2 of this. I think it does need another volume to set up the world, so well, I'll give you guys an update when that happens. In this last section here are everything that I read from 7 Seas. First up, we have Made in Abyss volume 11. We are in a brand new arc, and because we're in a brand new arc, I'm gonna go ahead and stop with Made in Abyss for right now. The reason why is because this is on a very slow release schedule. We get like 1 volume a year, and because it takes about 3 volumes to get through an entire arc, there's just no way I'm gonna remember what happens in this volume next year. But with that being said, if you want one of the grittiest worlds out there and one of the coolest stories you're gonna read in manga, go ahead and pick up the first 10 volumes of Made in Abyss. That encompasses several arcs and it is just so cool. Next up here, I read the entire omnibus of A Story of 7 Lives, and it basically follows 2 cats as they're going through life. What I really thought was interesting about the storytelling was I thought it was a main focus on the cats, but it's actually kind of a mix. It goes back and forth between the humans and the cats. It definitely brings a unique and different perspective to this kind of depressing and tumultuous story of hardship and grief, because you get to see both sides from the cat's perspective and the human's perspective. But yes, this is a very sad story about abuse and loss, so if that's not your cup of tea, or you have an animal and you don't want to really think about that with your animal, then I don't recommend this. But I actually thought it wasn't as depressing as I thought it was going to be, and there's a lot of redeeming qualities in here that give you the warm and fuzzies. The actual release itself is quite nice. I really like these white laminate pages, and the artwork is really nice as well. Next up here is Skip and Loafer volume 7. This was the big mic drop volume volume, and I was all for it. It was so well done, and there were several laugh out loud moments too. We get presented with a brand new arc in this volume, and it's just so well done. This is a perfect look into what friendship should be at the high school level. So yes, cannot recommend this enough. And another heartwarming series that you definitely need to put on your radar is Gap Papa Volume 2. If you don't know what this series is about, it follows a dad who is super serious at work, but when he comes home, he is a doting father and husband to his wife and his child, and it is so cute. My favorite character is obviously the little girl. She is absolutely hilarious, and the way they draw her in the chibi style is adorable. I love the full color. I love this release by 7 Seas, and I love the different episodes. They are so adorable, and I cannot recommend this series enough. This might be one of my favorite reads of 2023. And last but not least, I read the first 2 omnibuses of Marmalade Boy. This is an early 90s rom-com series that got a re-release in this collector's edition. This story follows our 2 teenagers here. Both their sets of parents get divorced, and then they marry each other's spouses, so then they become one conglomerate weird family, and they all move in together at the same house. But then they find out, even though they're stepbrother and stepsister, that they have feelings for each other. Yes, it sounds very messy. Yes, it's very dramatic, and is exactly what you think it is. I really love the beginning and the setup of the premise. What I don't like are the stereotypical tropes that were presented in basically every 90s rom-com, but specifically presented in Marmalade Boy. From the love triangles to the standard rom-com trope of misunderstanding, it definitely gets old after a while. There's some real toxic things that happen in this series, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what is going on? But with that being said, I love drama-filled rom-coms, so this is right up my alley. There are several things in this series that did not age well, from some of the jokes and to some of the relationships, but if you're looking for a classic shoujo series that put a stamp in the rom-com genre of the manga industry, this is one for you. And that is it for my manga reading log for the month of July. Some great things read this month, definitely some disappointments. August is shaping up to be something real special. I can't wait to share it with you. As always, if you enjoy the content of my videos, make sure you hit that like button, tap the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so that you know when more of my videos come out, and I will see you in the next one. Take care now. Bye-bye.